be sure to follow me on Instagram. There you can hang out with me and talk to me directly. Okay, so Absolute Carnage just keeps getting better and better. This story just keeps getting ridiculously good. It's absolutely insane. And what this one does is it gives us like one of the coolest moments ever in the history of Venom and all that good stuff. Now, initially this picks up after issue number 2. I'm still debating on whether or not I'm going to cover the tie-ins. I'm not 100% sure. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this issue by issue, is because if we decide to cover the tie-ins, we can do that later on just by like, or at least after this is done, like covering that video and then throwing it into the playlist and then just kind of being done with it. But it is cool because this comes in the aftermath of basically Carnage taking over Miles Morales. Now remember, Carnage is going after everybody who has in any form or fashion either come in contact with a symbiote, which grants them a codex, meaning that the symbiote leaves its DNA behind, or a person that he could add to his ranks in order to basically bolster his abilities and use them as a means to achieve his goal, right? So it's really kind of twofold. Technically, there wouldn't be a reason for him to grab Miles Morales, but Miles Morales is a spider person and very capable in his abilities. And so using him to his own ends, that allows him to basically go against Spider-Man and the rest of the superheroes a little more well-armed than he was before, instead of just relying on a huge amount of forces for him to use at his disposal. Now, in reality, like for the most part, in comparison to Earth superheroes, numbers trumps powers almost all the time. The only exception you get with that are like characters who can like warp reality or who have powers that have a huge area of effect, right? A huge AoE. So like if you're talking about somebody like Storm who can control like all the elements, well, the numbers don't really matter, right? Because she's just like, you get lightning and you get lightning and you get lightning. Everybody gets lightning, Whereas with someone like Iceman, he can just like freeze a ton of people at one point. But somebody like Wolverine has to kind of like hack and slash his way through each individual person, right? So like, numbers for the most part will trump people with huge amounts of abilities. That's why stories like this are always kind of intriguing. But Eddie Brock has to essentially leave Miles Morales behind, right? But this is kind of a funny thing, is because the symbiote sort of starts to turn. Now, this is what I love about Donny Cates' handling of the Venom symbiote, right? The fact that Donny Cates is sitting down and he's writing the symbiote in a way to where it's its own distinct character. This is why I say, I think Donny Cates' run on Venom will turn out to be one of the greatest runs on Venom ever written, right? Because you look at it and it's like, okay, so you get these cool progressions, things like that, but the idea of Eddie Brock and the symbiote fighting against each other, in the sense of the symbiote's just like, we need to kill as many of the forces of Carnage as we can, and that includes Norman Osborn. Eddie's response is, no, we can't kill him because it's not under his control, right? He's operating under what Carnage wants him to do, not what it is that he wants to do. And the response of Venom is, it doesn't matter. And that's kind of I kind of side with Venom on this one, right? I'm curious which side you go with, but I side with Venom on this one. Like, sure, he's not operating of his own accord, but it doesn't make him any less dangerous, right? It doesn't make him want to kill them any less, right? He's like, his desire is to kill them, like to take them over, incorporate them into the Carnage symbiote, and then to kind of expand their numbers, right? Like, knowing that he's not able to operate under his own accord, it doesn't matter, right? Like, he still wants to take them out. And so that's why it's kind of like, you do what you got to do, right? People who win wars are ones willing to do whatever it takes to win the war, not the ones who take the high ground, right? So it's kind of cool, right? Like, you got to fight fire with fire. The Allies against the Germans, for example, right? Like, both sides killed. And we saw how that worked out. So it's cool when it comes to this, because what ends up happening here is Eddie actually tries to turn his back on the Venom symbiote for a minute, because the symbiote goes and tries to kill Norman Osborn, and the response of Eddie is, you can't. Like, if you really want to kill them, fine, go on ahead and do it. Like, go on ahead. Like, I'm gonna go save somebody. Like, I'm gonna go be a hero. And this is interesting because what it does is it pits the symbiote in a way to where it basically has its own moral struggle. And that's what I love about this, is because the symbiote is now as much of a person as Eddie Brock is, right? The symbiote's in a spot where it's like, okay, yes, like Norman Osborn can't operate of his own accord. Basically, he's doing what the Carnage symbiote tells him to, as part of the Grendel and all that kind of cool stuff. He's not operating of his own will. And yes, he still wants to kill us, but it's killing him the right thing to do. And ultimately, like, Venom settles on the fact that it does not believe it's the right thing to do, and in turn ends up rebonding to Eddie, grabbing Matt Gargan, grabbing Scorpion, whose spine was broken by the forces of Carnage, and then flees. Basically takes off and goes back to Rex Strickland's safe house, which is, of course, again, where Eddie Brock is operating out of. Now, again, remember, like, when this whole thing went down, basically Eddie Brock told Spider-Man to get out of there and like to go find the Avengers, right? To like bring the Avengers together. And so, of course, that's exactly what Spider-Man did. Now, of course, we get Wolverine and we get Captain America, two old school members of the New Avengers when Brian Michael Bendis wrote them. We also end up getting Ben Grimm, who, again, is a heavy hitter and is kind of what they need. And then we get the mind of Bruce Banner. And the reason why they need them, or why they need him, is because when it comes to human biology, for the most part, like, you do kind of have a hierarchy, right? I mean, you got Reed Richards, Valeria Richards, Dr. Doom at the top, who trade like the #1 spot, depending on who's writing the story. And then you kind of start going down from there. But just because someone is like the 3rd smartest person in the world does not mean they're overall the 3rd smartest person. Reed is the smartest person in the world across the board. That's true. But when it comes down to like specializations, like Bruce Banner takes the cake when it comes to human biology, especially gamma radiation. And so he's the guy that kind of takes that stance. When it comes to technology, it's Tony Stark. Like it's these cool little things that you kind of see with these specialization of characters that can sort of lend themselves to telling a particular type of story. And that's what's been going on here, is that the science behind the Maker in terms of curing the son of Venom of his codex works, right? Like the codex is now gone from the son of Venom. I'm sorry, gone from not the son of Venom, gone from Normie, from the son of Norman Osborn. And so it basically, I'm sorry, the grandson of Norman Osborn. But it works for the purpose that it serves, because what it means is this technology can be used to basically cure all the various superheroes of their codices. Now, what it does is it removes 1/2 of the reason why why Carnage would want to take them, right? I mean, if these various characters have been hosts of the Venom symbiote in some form or another, and a codices was left behind on them, then in turn, like, Carnage would want to take them in order to get that codex. With that codex being removed, now Carnage doesn't have a reason, at least as far as that goes, to take them. But the power and the knowledge of Captain America, the power of like Wolverine, the power of Ben Grimm would still serve as an asset, meaning Carnage could still take them if he chose. So again, like, there's still motivation there for him to basically capture these guys and snatch them up and run away. And so as a result of this, you basically end up having having these different guys kind of thrown into these tubes of sorts that are designed to basically remove this codex from them. Now, a really cool moment happens here, because when this takes place, Spider-Man walks up, starts talking to Eddie Brock, and it's a really sort of heart-to-heart conversation. And this is interesting, because what it shows is that there aren't really any hard feelings between Peter and Eddie Brock, right? And indeed, there really weren't. I mean, ultimately, it was Eddie that kind of came down to constantly tracking down and constantly wanting to take out Peter. But at the end of the day, it's one of these things where they're basically allies. And this is why stories like this are so cool, is because what it means is that going forward, Eddie Brock could become, and probably will be, a tried and true good guy, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you started seeing Eddie Brock on more like Avengers stories, different things like that, because of how capable he is and because of the fact that he's essentially turning over a new leaf. The issue with this is that when Peter basically asks Eddie, are you going to tell Dylan about the fact that you're basically his father, that Eddie for an instant seems to not know, and then ponders it, and then in turn, the real Eddie comes running up out of nowhere. And he's like, dude, Peter, get away from that guy, only for us to find out this is not Eddie Brock. This is Carnage, and it is amazing. I love these twists and turns, man. Like, I love what Donny Cates is doing with this. Dude, Donny Cates, man, this guy, I swear to God, man, this guy's like right up here with Hickman for me. Like, the writing styles, totally different. The ability to create epic stuff, exactly the same. Like, it's amazing. Dude, Donny Cates, man, everything this guy writes is gold. Like, it's oh my God, it's incredibly nuts. Like, it's Donny Cates, kudos to you, man. I am digging what I'm loving what you're laying down, man. This is awesome. Because in turn, like, Carnage basically summons all of his forces in and starts attacking every single one of these guys. And the response of Venom is like, look, like I told you what would happen. I told you we had to take these guys out. I told you we had to kill them. And I told them what would happen if you were a half measure, if you didn't do what needed to be done in order to win. And that's ultimately the coolest thing about this, is it's like, those who can't do what needs to be done in order to win lose. And that's just the way it is. It's always that way, right? Like, you know, it's cool to take the moral high ground, and it makes you feel good at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, you lose. And that's just the way it is. So I guess if you're okay with losing, then the moral high ground is fine. If you're not okay with losing, then do what it takes to win. And that's the response of Venom. If you're not willing to do what it takes, if you're not strong enough to do what it takes, then I will find someone who is. I will find someone who's strong enough to be able to take this threat head on and not have any reservation about killing the various forms of Carnage that are running around out there. And so in response to this, the Venom symbiote abandons Eddie Brock and bonds itself to Bruce Banner. Following that, like, Carnage is kind of like, I don't know who this loser is, whatever, who cares? Let's focus on the things that need to be focused on. But instead, he basically craps his pants when he comes face to face with what I think is probably one of the most cool characters that we've ever seen in the history of comics, Venom Hulk. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.